Hi guys, it's Petria here, your friend that's also a lawyer. And if you're watching this series, it means that you're hoping to learn a little bit more about the law and also hopefully that you're starting a journey on purchasing a property. Now, this series is designed for people who have either purchased a property before or even if you're just looking at purchasing your very first home. Hopefully there's something for everyone and you'll definitely learn something by watching this series. So today I wanted to talk about what do you do when you find the right property? What do you do first? Who do you contact first? And when do you actually need to instruct a solicitor? Well, I always say the first best step is to make sure that you've got a fantastic mortgage broker. And if you need recommendations, I'm always happy to share the mortgage brokers that I work with that I think are fab and absolutely top notch. However, having a mortgage broker in place right at the start means that you're going to have a clear idea as to what kind of money you can actually spend on a property before you go falling in love with one. And that's especially important even if you're looking at an investment property or a second property, because while you might think the equity might work, or while you might think that this property is likely to be a goer, if you haven't actually spoken to someone about the finance, then you can't be sure. So mortgage broker or your bank manager is always a best first step. But when do you actually need to instruct a solicitor? Like, when do you need to talk to your lawyer? Well, don't worry, I've got you covered. We're going to be talking a lot today about when do you actually instruct your solicitor? So, you've found the property, you've spoken to the mortgage broker, and you've got the money. You're ready to make the offer. But when do you need to contact your solicitor? Well, the answer is that depends. There's no one size fits all when it comes to instructing a solicitor, and let me tell you why. So, if you've never done this before, you've never gone down this road, and you're just not sure what to do, then I would recommend contacting your solicitor before you make an offer. Why? Because your solicitor then has the opportunity to run you through the process and explain how all of this works. However, if you've done this before, and I spoke about this in my previous video, then I recommend that you use the agent to help you make the offer. But why? Well, your agent will have a property pack, and in the property pack, there should be a blank agreement for sale and purchase. The blank agreement will look like a standard sale and purchase agreement that we looked at last time, but it will look like this. And in there, you'll see they would have filled out all the vendor's information and the property information as well. Then what they can do is they can sit down with you and go through your information and, most importantly, what kind of money you want to offer. They can then go through conditions with you, and by that I mean they'll go through the first page and ask if there are any conditions that you'd like to insert on the first page. If you'd like to put in a due diligence condition, and we spoke about that in my last video, then that will go in the further terms of sale. But remember, the agent acts for the vendor. Always, because that's how they get paid. So if they push back on a due diligence condition, then you're already going to understand why, because you watched my last video and you know that agents can get a little bit nervous when they see due diligence conditions because you might change your mind and then they won't get paid. Now, if you use an agent for this part, you've just saved a little bit of money, and also you've managed to use the agent to your advantage, because it means they can be a direct line of communication between you and the vendor. They can guide you on things like what kind of price a vendor is likely to take, and also what sort of conditions they're after. Because even though the conditions are for you to decide and for you to determine, the agent might be able to tell you a little bit about what the vendor is expecting in terms of timeframes. So no matter what conditions you have, you can put whatever timeframe in that you like. And while there are standard timeframes or industry standard timeframes, at the end of the day, it depends on what you can manage and what kind of timeframes you want to put in there for your specific conditions. Now, if you've used the agent, they'll go ahead and take that agreement and they will literally physically take it to the vendor, and they'll sit down with them and decide whether or not the vendor likes your offer. They might have a counter offer, or they might say that they'd like you to make some changes, and then the agent will bring it back to you and the process starts again. So if you want to use your agent, it's a great opportunity to use them, and you don't need to go to a solicitor at this point. However, if you haven't done this before, then I really recommend you use the solicitor to help you make the offer. The agent might still fill it out with you, so they might still put your details in and all of your conditions in, but it's at this point that you would take it to your solicitor and they would cast your eye over it. Now, if your solicitor's anything like me, they probably won't charge you for this. They'll just do a quick look and tell you if you're on the right track. So you don't need to worry too much about this part of it. However, if you've got some really complicated conditions, Or if there are things in there that are a little bit trickier than usual, then yes, it's likely your solicitor is going to charge you for this. But it's always best to have your solicitor look at it at the start to make sure we don't have any expensive problems a little bit further down the line. So there's really two options to when you need to actually instruct your solicitor. One, before you make the offer, and obviously that's my preference, or your solicitor will get involved once your offer has actually been accepted. When your offer's been accepted, the vendor's going to go ahead and sign that agreement, and then they're going to date it. And that's when all of your timelines start ticking down for your conditions. So for example, if you have a finance condition and you signed on a Tuesday, then day one is going to be Wednesday. We then count every working day to figure out what 10 working days is after you sign the agreement. Now remember, a working day is Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It doesn't include public holidays, and it doesn't include a very specific amount of time around Christmas. So make sure if you are making offers around December, New Year's, and Christmas, that you really keep an eye out for that, because that does trip people up from time to time. Solicitors shut down for like 3 weeks over Christmas, and so do banks. And so basically, the agreement sale and purchase that we all use accounts for that. Anyway, if your solicitor gets involved at this stage, that's when they're going to go ahead and help you work through all of those conditions. And the real difference is that they just wouldn't have seen the agreement before. So you might just need to do a little bit of groundwork with them to explain where you're up to and what sort of things you want them to be looking for. There's no right or wrong answer, but it all depends on what you're comfortable with and whether you've done this before. So basically, if you've done it before, I'd be pretty comfortable for you to work with the agent. But if you haven't done this before, then please make sure your solicitor looks at it before you go making the offer and before you actually put pen to paper. Hopefully this video has demystified a little bit of the process, but keep an eye out on my page. Make sure you hit subscribe, because I'm just about to drop more videos that are going to run you through the entire purchasing process from start to finish. What I'm going to talk about in my next video is conditions, but I'm also going to be talking about how to actually insert the right conditions for you, including giving you some of my favorite conditions that I like to use for clients that use me when they're purchasing a property, whether it's an investment or whether it's their first property. This works for everyone. I'm also going to talk about deposits, when they're due, and talk about how to get KiwiSaver out while also saving a little bit of money on legal fees. So hopefully this is the start of a beautiful friendship, and I will see you next time. All right, bye my friends. See you later. Mwah.